Hey, welcome to your weekly Corner Späti. It is me, Kieran, and I'm joined by Uma.
Hello.
And Nick.
Hey.
And today we are joined by Nemanja, a PhD student at the University of Belgrade with an organization called Marks 21 to talk to us about, in my opinion, a very long overdue episode about Serbia because stuff has been going on there for a while, but probably with a huge focus on these protests. And Nemanja, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. Greetings, everyone.
All right. So first, because this is a fast-moving situation, I'm going to do something that a lot of other podcasts in our field do, but we don't do. We're recording this on Friday, the 7th of February, because when this comes out, I think things are going to change.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. If
it
we
feels
were
wrong. It feels wrong saying the date, though. It feels like we're exposing ourselves.
Yeah, I feel naked in front of the
Yeah, we're gonna get doxxed because we say what day of the week it is.
Somehow, someone on the internet figures this out. Yeah, it's just it needs to be done. But so if anything that we say on this episode is wrong, trust that it was right when we said it. All right, so Nemanja, I to start with all of this, we have to talk about I guess your understanding of the incident that incited these protests. I remember the articles, again, this is like English speaking press, international kind of press, talking about the incident at a train station in Novi Sad, and I'm just kind of interested in we got some bullet points basically outside of Serbia, and I feel like obviously based on the response within Serbia, this people reacted to this differently. I'm just kind of wondering if you could guide us through that event and how it was received within country.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with that. I'll tell you with my personal. It's not an anecdote or something like that. It's just at the moment of the collapse of this, however you want to get the incident, or I would say a crime that occurred in Novi Sad. I was at a protest in Belgrade. It was a protest organized by the teachers' unions who were protesting because an agreement that was signed more than a year earlier between the government and the trade union trade unions was not put into practice. And this agreement was signed as some kind of let's say, a way to appease the teachers in order not to strike. Why? Because of the previous terrible massacre that happened in Serbia, which is something extremely new for this type of society. So just to reverse back to 2023, there was a massive school shooting in an elementary school, and immediately after that, there was a shooter on the loose in some of the villages relatively close to Belgrade, and in total almost more than 20 people and I think 8 children were killed. But there were protests, but nothing happened at all. The society didn't heal as much. There was as soon as the teachers wanted to go on strike, when after the summer break, the school year was about to start, teachers were about to strike because nothing was happening. They gave this kind of a, let's say, made some kind of a agreement or whatever protocol, which should change something. But even that was not put into practice for more than a year. So I felt like there was a lot of symbolism in this, that precisely at the moment on November the 1st, 2024, at 11:52, when there was an incident in Novi Sad, there was a protest happening at the same time in Belgrade. And I don't know, I didn't hear about the incident in Novi Sad straight away. I read about it like an hour after it, and I saw it on the phone. At the time, we didn't know what was happening. We didn't think how it was reported. We didn't think it was anybody who got hurt or anything like that. But yeah, I feel it is really important to put it in, at least in this kind of context, that the society didn't heal from a previous massive incident, massive shooting and massive killings which occurred, and it just the feelings of the masses just erupted instantly. Like straight away, everybody was in disbelief and just watching the news, seeing, and as the tallies grew, as they were extracting bodies from the remnants of this. I'm keep missing the word of what is it, kind of like the thing which protects you from the sun and the rain in front
shelter,
of the
like
shelter. Okay, yeah.
The overhang.
Yeah, the overhang which collapsed. Yeah, sorry, I was missing the English word. So anyway, throughout the day, we were like just listening to the news as they were excavating bodies from underneath the wreck, and everybody felt so hopeless. In a sense, we already had something so traumatic as this over a year ago, and nothing happened. And it was just until when is all of this going to go on? And it felt like the whole society collapsed in a sense. All of the kind of traditional ways of keeping the community together were systematically destroyed over the years and decades, and everybody felt so alone in all of this. So I guess one of the first impulses was just to go and meet together. So it was kind of like, I think it was immediately the day after or 2 days after. People just met on the streets in Novi Sad, not straight away because it was announced 3 days of mourning. In Novi Sad, in Serbia, was only 1 day, if I remember correctly. Anyway, after the day of mourning, we met in the streets and we had a minute of silence, but nobody felt at peace at the moment. And I remember that first protest in Belgrade, it was just a sense of violence, like people requiring some kind of revenge. It's just, average person just being in the streets and being angry, being just wanting to commit some kind of violence. People were literally saying, everything would be fine if each of us would just grab one of the enemies and just beat them up. So that was the Belgrade protest. It was on, let's say, 3rd of November. And on the 4th or 5th of November, I'm sorry, I can't really remember the exact date. It was 3 months ago, and it's not just typical 3 months. It's been extremely dynamic, which is quite unusual for Serbia. There was this huge protest in Novi Sad, which started at the train station, and I think it was one of the biggest protests in the history of Novi Sad, which is second biggest city in Serbia. And it was just stoked with emotions, and everybody there was just didn't know how to express themselves. And I definitely felt like violence and was the kind of like the order of the day. People were just sick of kind of like institutional ways of dealing with anything because they were left alone by all of those institutions. And those first protests were indeed quite violent. Obviously, the usual practice by the regime is to send in some kind of like either secret service or some kind of like thugs, usually far right wing or ultra fans who do the dirty job, and they kind of like try to discredit the whole movement by instigating violence. And they definitely were there. I mean, I saw a couple of them, but I don't think that it could be some of the violence and demolition of the city hall from the outside. It wasn't really demolished. It was, let's say, more kind of like graffiti. There was a lot of the windows were broken, etc. But it wasn't just down to those kind of like thugs. It was also the masses were extremely angry and wanted to kind of like let go of this feeling, at least for a bit. So it already started like this, with this kind of like huge kind of venting, if we wanna call it like that. The regime started responding to all of this with repression. Again, people have hopefully will go deeper into this kind of like more than a decade of rule by Vučić and his party. But also before this, after the previous incident in the school shooting, they have responded with repression, with supporting the police, etc. Again, here now they've been arresting people protesting and just sending either police undercover, just being there. There was also some videos of police who were undercover, who didn't represent themselves as policemen, who would just take people away, and when people were obviously, disobeying those kind of orders because like it's just a random person just dragging you out of the street, it kind of like really made everyone even more angry. And the reason, one other reason which really infuriated most of the people is that Vučić nor nobody else decided to come to Novi Sad, to the place of the incident, or I don't know how to kneel down before those victims or do anything like that. The only time they decided to come to Novi Sad is when their party headquarters in Novi Sad were demolished in a bit by the crowd who were angry. Well, this was the first time Vučić came to Novi Sad. So these were kind of like the first couple of days. I know I've been talking for quite a while, so yeah. I don't know.
Perfect, and a lot more context that I feel like the English-speaking world gets around this. And this does actually, because basically I'm now just like, after hearing that, I'm now thinking like, I know exactly how the rest of this episode is going to go. I'm going to tell you some bullshit I've seen in the English-speaking press, and you're going to tell me how it's kind of wrong. Because I do remember those reports of, for lack of a better word, this incident in Novi Sad happened, and how it was framed in, like even the Financial Times, which does good journalism, was like they framed it as a tragedy, right? Like this could have happened anywhere. This was a freak occurrence. Isn't that kind of sad? I've seen maybe like one report, and I can't remember where. I think like I've seen reports now that the protests have gained like momentum, that like when this collapse of the train station happened in Novi Sad, that mentioned things like this was a relatively new construction. There was probably a lot of corruption and corners cut with its construction. And because if you saw those stories back in November that made it into English-speaking press, I think the people outside of Serbia probably viewed it as a tragedy, basically. No one's fault. Isn't it sad people got hurt? Isn't it sad people died? Rather than I feel like how Serbians responded, which is, no, there is actually someone responsible for this. And I'm kind of wondering if you could explain like how, like who's responsible for this? What is the responsibility here? How this isn't just a tragedy?
Yeah, sure. It's a really good kind of like correction to what I've been being, or let's say something that needs to be supplemented. Is precisely this. It what everybody was obviously confused when it all happened. Like you don't know nothing about the actual reconstruction and all of this. So the train station has been there since 1964. It's been standing perfectly well. Everything was fine, and then it has been under reconstruction since 2021, let's say, and it was kind of like officially opened in 2024. I think it was in July or something like that. There was at the time, I think at the time he was a mayor of Novi Sad. Afterwards, he was a prime minister of Serbia when this crime occurred, and everybody was then just asking, wasn't this just renovated? How come that it collapsed right now? And it was just a logical, not about, most of us are, we're not technical experts or something like that. It's just common sense. Like if it stood like this for 60 years and nothing happened, how come that it collapsed now after it's sort of new? And then it was kind of like really weird media spins coming from the regime. Even Vučić had his talk to the nation on the day, saying that everything in the train station was renovated apart from this overhanging which collapsed. And it was then the obvious question was, why wasn't it then reconstructed? If everything was, why wasn't it? And obviously in the first couple of weeks there was this kind of like discussion. Why did it happen? What was the main reason? And there were some technical experts discussing all of this. And what came out with some diligent, I would say, also journalism, but also fierce media pressure, public pressure, and people just refusing to believe any of the lies. It sort of became obvious that many people were forced to sign off and say, when there was some kind of like technical inspection, saying, "Oh, it's all fine." In essence, so it's a from architectural standpoint, I think it's quite an astonishing way of how this overhanging was being held like this, and they introduced something new within the train station, which put too much weight onto this, and that's why it collapsed. So it was obvious that at one point during this, it was also shown that also this overhanging, or however it's called, was actually renovated. It was new. And obviously then it was someone's fault who signed it up, that it was something good. As a matter of fact, there was too much weight now put onto those kind of like, it's not chains, it's just something that keeps them from collapsing. So the question was, who is it to blame for all of this? And then the immediate, they tried to put it down just to some people, let's say, locally in charge, but it was obviously not enough. So Vučić, for the first one who he threw under the bus, was the Minister of Infrastructure at the time, Goran Vesić, who was previously mayor of Belgrade, and his official announcement of resignation was something that even further infuriated most of the people, because he said, I'm in position which makes me responsible, but I don't feel guilty. That's essentially what he said, and people were just getting more crazy and crazy. But it was obvious to everyone this was not just an incident, because like if obviously if something is just an incident, or it is decided by chance, sometimes something good would happen to outweigh all of the bad things. But this was obviously such a bad thing. In my opinion, and something which I realized from all of these kind of like technical experts or some kind of like media insights, is that by the dictate of some of the kind of like big companies which were involved, this is mostly the interest of the Chinese investments needing the rail works to connect, I would say, Thessaloniki to Central Europe. They have invested the most. It was required that all of this happen as fast as possible and without any kind of asking questions, etc. So just do it as fast as you can. We don't care about anything. So there were some stories for some of those inspectors who were feeling pressures to sign off that everything is fine. And also, from what I got, there wasn't kind of like a signing off on the entire project, but what they do is this kind of like salami slicing. The entire train station was done as kind of like the renovation of the entire train station was done in kind of like different parts. So you can technically say, oh, this will stand by itself. It passes these kind of like requirements, but without taking into consideration the entirety, how all of these different projects or pieces of salami, when they're put together, how would they interact with each other? Because that's kind of like the typical way of how many projects in this kind of like periphery are being carried out, of doing it as fast as you can, so you don't have to bother with these kind of like safety requirements, etc. So in essence, it was clear that it was kind of like some form of corruption. But how we would define corruption is something that I think really influences the rest of the movement. The corruption is kind of like the common sense now, that everybody knows that this was corruption and that there is somebody who is to blame. But let's just see how deep these structural reasons for these corruptions are.
I should actually mention something that's a bit of a lore thing on our podcast, which is this this train line is also responsible for one of our I know me and Nick's most enjoyed recent Vučić clip.
Oh yeah, the train to Kosovo that doesn't like.
No, not that one.
Oh, okay, not the Serbian nationalist train.
No, this was if I understand correctly, the one
where he was with Orban and he's like waving at nothing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so if I'm so that adds a little bit of other context as well, because this was kind of like this was like a big project of Vučić as well. This like connection from like this. I'm not sure if it's high speed or what, but a major connection between Budapest and Serbia, basically.
Yeah, it is. And Vučić is trying to get as many as popular points as he can from all of this. But just to be clear, all of this railway infrastructure has been existing in Serbia and the surrounding countries for more than 50 years. We had communist parties in power who were constructed entire countries with all of this. There was a direct train between Belgrade and Budapest, and it ran up until I think 2016 or 17, and then all of a sudden they said the Serbian government, Serbian Progressive Party, said that they are renovating all of the rail tracks and they would finish in like a year and a half at max or something like that. But it turned out they haven't finished yet. So like I think in 2022, they reopened the Belgrade to Novi Sad, just Belgrade to Novi Sad, which is like 80 kilometers distance. And this in 2024, they were just precisely in just, I think in October or November, they were preparing for opening up this next, the rest of the rails in Serbia all the way to Hungary between Novi Sad and Subotica. They were just preparing to open that, to make all of these popular points with all of this, but the collapse of the train station prevented them from doing this. So anyway, this is a huge and from my knowledge, the biggest investment project in Serbia in the last, 20, 30 years or something like that. Essentially, it is mostly sponsored by the Chinese government or their companies. And from my understanding, it's part of their Belt and Road Initiative. Essentially, they the majority of the investment they do in Europe, I think something like 40% go to Serbia. Of all of their European investment goes into Serbia. It has to do somewhat with geography of Serbia, which stands directly between the Mediterranean and the Central Europe, and is perhaps kind of like the fastest way. But also it has to do with this political situation in Serbia, which is not part of EU. It has, because the Chinese also tried to buy some of the important industries within the European Union, but they were prevented for this. Here, they were allowed. So they have invested heavily in the infrastructure, not just in Serbia, but mainly in Serbia. They usually sponsor, giving out loans for huge infrastructure projects like highways, like the railroad. Also, it has many, how should I say it, kind of like obligations within those loans, including like we would have Serbia or whichever government would have to employ Chinese workers, use Chinese equipment, etc. Anyway, the railroad, as compared to all of these kind of like highway, has been, I think, like 5 times. The loan was 5 times higher than all of the other infrastructure projects. So this was kind of like the biggest one, with a goal of connecting the Mediterranean and the Adriatic Sea to Central Europe and Budapest. So this was part of this kind of network, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think we've talked about on the podcast before of this kind of like Chinese investment backdoor to the European Union, where like more in conversation about Montenegro, where they've also done a lot of infrastructure investment on the idea that they get in right before Montenegro joins the European Union.
Yeah, Chinese investment within also the European. I mean, because you have to remember, like post the like Greek financial crisis, China has been very active in buying up a lot of like infrastructure in Athens and whatnot. Like Chinese investment's huge there. It's kind of like kept under the table, but I think like with the current government now, with accepting more. I mean, remember, Syriza was the bad egg of Europe, so I think that they legitimately saw some possible progress with working with China, but I know that the current government in Greece is working a lot less with them. And Italy, remember, was like really stoked on Belt and Road until like 2-3 years ago. They just like dropped it.
Maloney is like a big kind of stunt left Belt and Road.
Yeah.
Kind of like more as a like just letting you know I'm on America's side.
Yeah. And I mean, same thing too with New Democracy in that sense in Greece, because I mean, this has created a massive like real estate problem as well in Athens. Just not even the amount of investment that then's come in from China for infrastructure, but then like Chinese landlords in Athens are like driving the prices of everything up there. So you'll just you'll see like a bunch of like activism stuff done on a very local level that'll like never get out of the country there. That kind of addresses this sense of like one Chinese businessman owns like 11,000 apartments or whatever in Athens or something insane like that.
In Serbia, it's a slightly different situation. Most of the Chinese investments goes through these kind of like big companies and in the infrastructure projects, which are, I would say, just kind of crucial for this transport of many of the goods towards this. And as we know, the by rail is the second cheapest after by the sea. So yeah. It hasn't affected, I would say, or let's say it wasn't the main factor in the surging housing prices, etc. This factor, but yeah.
So going back to something I saw in English-speaking press that I feel like is missing a bit of the context or is not the whole truth, but these protests keep getting described as student-led. And my understanding, as limited as it is, seems to be that that's maybe how it started, but it certainly does not describe what is currently happening with the numbers that they've reached. And I'm wondering what you're like, and this is a good opportunity to talk about like how these protests kind of have built momentum and what has happened since the protests have begun.
Yes, certainly, and that is somewhat correct evaluation of this entire thing. In a sense, there has been a political vacuum on the political scene in Serbia, because there is this kind of like a opposition to Vučić today, which kind of like just pro-EU opposition, somewhat of the pro-Russian opposition, but mainly is this pro-EU opposition, which offers, in my opinion, nothing different. Actually, Vučić is even more pro-EU and especially pro-neoliberal in everything that he does, but he just perhaps more pragmatist about it and does it, with a foot down and not, trying to be nice about it or something like that. So anyway, there because of that, there has been a vacuum, and the masses or something like with their discontent, they were looking for something alternative and something which appears as, let's say, pure or something like that is the youth. So there have been some kind of like youth movements or something like youth groups, which are, it was unclear whether they were connected to this opposition, but they, let's say, started some of these initial protests immediately after this crime that happened on November the 1st. But this, when the students actually get involved, is a bit later. I think it was 22nd of February. Oh, sorry, of November. Now we're in February. So in between these 20 days, the things that have been happening is mostly just people getting together at the different crossroads or something like that, and holding 15 minutes of silence. And this has been agitating some of the people, and Vučić was sending, obviously, against some of the thugs to discredit the entire gathering from all of this. And this escalated on 22nd of November in front of the Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Belgrade, when the students were doing precisely this, holding 15 minutes of silence at one of the crossroads near their faculty, and some of the thugs came and started assaulting them. So the students decided they're not going to go on with that. They're not going to just stay silent about it. So they returned to their faculty. They occupied it and started a blockade. Immediately later that day, in solidarity with them, two other faculties from my, if I remember correctly, was the Faculty of Philosophy and Philology in the city center. In solidarity, they also occupied their faculties and started their assemblies. So that was Friday. And then on Monday, there was already some sort of a wave or expanding of students occupying their own faculties. And there was a rectorate, which kind of like the central building for the whole university, was occupied and gathering all of the students together. I think the first meeting actually was already on Friday in the rectorate building. But yeah, it just started from there, and the students just decided not to bow down to all of this increasing violence. And from that moment on, we can say that it was led by the students. Students in their assemblies, which we call plenums, have quite quickly came up with some clear demands, which were missing after this incident or crime, as I would describe it, on the November the 1st, and actually gave some kind of a political expression to this discontent, which, as I said, in this vacuum has not been expressed, and the masses have not been able to express their discontent in any other way. So the students have done it. They've put their demands, and they've instantly somewhat inspired other students, but also systematically and with clear plans started agitating other students in other more controlled faculties to expand. For an example, I'm at the Faculty of Political Sciences. It has a bit of different, let's say, different context than, I don't know, the arts or the philosophy, etc. So we would just go and try to gather as many of the critically thinking students, and especially in moments like this, there's plenty of them, and we just became a majority. We organized an assembly, and that's sort of how it expanded. Initially, Vučić and the regime tried to discredit it, like if nothing's happening, then and it's a typical kind of set of things that he's been doing whenever there's some kind of a big gathering. Then trying to send some thugs, but then when he saw that it was such a rapidly expanding movement, and don't hold me, I'm not entirely sure whether this was in the same week or the week after, he acknowledged that there was some big student protests, and he decided that he's going to address them. So he usually he does all of these addresses from some more secluded places, but this time he decided to do it from the building of where the president usually is. And it was live broadcasted, but the students decided to go in front of the building and shout it throughout of his address to the nation, where he sort of tried to present himself as someone who is fulfilling all of these demands. And yeah, sorry, I should mention now what the demands are. I'm not sure if the international audience is aware of all of that. Yeah, and
I haven't seen anyone outline them.
Yes.
Me and all my friends are talking about the demands. I don't know about you guys. I don't know what you and your circle's doing, but we can't stop talking about them.
Yeah. So in short, initially there were 5, but then one was, let's say, merged. 2 were merged into one. So now there's 4 demands. The first one is the publication of all of the documentation concerning the renovation of the train station in Novi Sad, and the criminal procession of everyone who should be processed. The second one is criminal charging and trial of everyone who have been assaulting the students and exerting violence to everyone protesting. Because everything was caught on camera, and it was quite clear that many of them are officials, both of the Serbian Progressive Party and are part of the administration in some, let's say, lower level. So they were known by names, and it was like they need to be processed. The third one was the release of all of the protesters who have been imprisoned or trialed throughout. As I mentioned, in the early protests, they were arrested without any kind of like police representing themselves as police officers. And the fourth one was the budget increase spending on the higher education by 20%. So in this address, all of these demands are nothing spectacular. They're just, I would say, completely within reason. And they were hotly debated by the student assemblies in each of the faculties. And this is something that quite quickly, I would say, we've summarized them to this. So when Vučić was addressing the nation and these kind of like student demands, he presented himself as some, let's say, granting all of these wishes to these spoiled brats, as he usually, his language is so derogative to everyone who's disagreeing with him. And then he was, I don't know, making a demonstration, and he brought, 20 boxes of documentation. Everything is here and we have done everything. And then he tried to make it a spin like, we are going to increase 20% of, just the renovation of the higher education buildings or something like that to make it less or something like that. But the students didn't buy the bait. As per usual, Vučić does this kind of like carrot and stick, sends the thugs, and then kind of like appeases with some kind of promises or something. I told you about the teachers union. He gave them some kind of agreement, which he completely didn't put into practice. But the students from the relevant faculties got together. They formed a kind of like a working group and went through the entire documentation and said, this has been forged, this is missing, this is not there, you are lying. And saying the demands have not been met. And also this 20%, this has not been this is not what we are asking, etc., etc. Also with the second and the third demand. So, and this, I think, was the moment when the people, the rest of Serbia, really recognized that this could be something big, that we are not there just, to cave immediately after. It's just the students who have, I don't know, who are angry. There was some this kind of like a outpouring of emotions, and we've been blockading for 10 days, and that's it. Let's go home as soon as Vucic tells something. And this was one moment when it kind of like felt like this might grow. And and it did continue to grow. And by late December, I think it was 22nd of December, so a month after the assault on students of Faculty of Dramatic Arts, there was the biggest protest in the history of Serbia. It's debatable, but since the fall of Milosevic in 2000, the previous there were other authoritarian leaders, but yeah, it was approximately 100,000 people in one of the squares, which is a huge numbers for Serbia. So yeah, as it grew, then obviously it was an issue of holiday season coming up, whether we could survive it, and everybody. This was another kind of like a hurdle on our path, and to see whether how durable are we, whether it's all possible to do just in the some easier times. Obviously, throughout this, it's November and December. They tend to be, even with this global warming, they tend to be quite cold, and with the faculties being occupied in all these institutions, it was quite cold. Many of our colleagues had to protect the buildings and stand outside for hours. We had this kind of like security and all of this, and so it was becoming already a bit tiring. So there was this kind of like worry whether we would survive throughout the New Year's night, whether many of the students. So Serbia is quite centralized country, so most of the students do come from other smaller cities or other from, I don't know, peripheries. They come to Belgrade or Novi Sad or Niš, the third biggest city of Serbia in the south. They would go back home for Christmas or something like that. But the students organized sort of a party for New Year's. They had many of the kind of like events ongoing, and they did manage to survive throughout. And not just that, they didn't back down on any of the demands or anything else happening. So since then, it has provided some kind of a platform for much wider expression of discontent. But it has been, and I would say still is, led by the students up until now. But it's now reaching a point of perhaps it has definitely overcome the point of this being just a student movement. Students are still probably seen as the leaders of this entire movement, but it has definitely become a wider social movement.
So then, I guess, like, feel free to fill in the gaps, but since in terms of like English speaking press, you get basically like 3 stories, like you force, the Telegraph or the Times, whatever, to write about. The actual crime itself in Novi Sad, the protests beginning and getting some momentum. I'd say we got like the first real article about that in like mainstream press about January, really. But then obviously the next thing that gets everyone to take notice is the resignations of people like the Prime Minister. And I'm curious on basically your opinion of these things. I spent a lot of time having back and forth with my friends about like, what does this mean? What are they trying to do? Is this a strategy? Is this going to work? And I'm kind of curious as to the resignations and how they've been received by wider Serbia and the protest movement.
Yeah, it's been one of a surprise, to be perfectly honest, and a positive surprise, at least from my side. And I think people in general were surprised at first, because it's been more than a decade of continuous scandals, like something that it's unimaginable in some, let's say, more westernized countries. You had ministers not just making some gaffes, which I don't know, from what I see, Boris Johnson had to resign because of the Partygate, etc. It's not just this kind of like gaffes, even though that is not something something small, what Johnson did, but you had ministers directly involved in this kind of like arms sales, I don't know, in direct corruption, or supporting marijuana dealers, something like just ridiculous. One of the ministers, his driver, while the minister was in a car, killed someone, and it was recorded on camera. All of a sudden, this videotape was gone. So it just something unimaginable, and still all of them remained in position. And this was now for the first time that somebody resigned. Indeed, after the school shooting I mentioned a year before, one of the education minister resigned, but he was not from the ruling party, which I don't know. People saw this was something good. It was their coalition, the Socialist Party, which is not socialist at all. But this was the first time that it was clear that it wasn't just an individual, making some kind of resigning by himself, but being dictated by Vučić. So it was surprised that, we are seeing ministers go. And then we saw for the first time the whole government collapse, the prime minister resigning, which was something I know in October nobody would have imagined. Even in November, it was beyond imagination that we could actually pressure them into doing this. So this was one part of the reaction. The second part is that this was not enough. Everybody is obviously aware that all of the power resides with Vučić and obviously whoever is behind him, of the bigger, however, people who require him to do all of the stuff. And that prime ministers are there just the puppets to do whatever he does. And it was just too little, too late. And also, again, his resignation was still. He didn't say that he didn't feel guilty, but it was just ironic. Yeah, I'm guilty for everything. Yeah, go on, just put it all on me. And it was obviously insincere. But even if we go beyond the rhetorics, the movement was becoming aware of its power because for the first time it had a glimpse of it. It took down a government, and he knew that the power didn't reside precisely with this prime minister, and he felt blood, and he wanted to go further, and he says that for anything to change even slightly, Vučić has to fall. So this is kind of like the moment where we are now, where we are for the first time actually challenging the core of the power, which is Vučić, and for the first time properly, the masses are asking themselves what happens afterwards. Usually, it was just the minority of the movement thinking about. It's not just, it's not enough to be anti-Vučić. You have to be aware of what you are for. But this was just, an abstract question, something that, maybe in 10, 15 years or whatever, this is now becoming sort of a reality, and is an issue that is a really big hurdle, I would say, for the movement, which avoids any kind of politics, which is on the one side really good because it distances itself from the opposition politicians, but it fails to discuss politics as such. And I think it opens up the possibility of, even if the Vučić falls, which is still maybe probable, but perhaps at this moment still unlikely.
As we're saying on February 7th, mind you. This could all change within a week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an extremely dynamic situation. Yeah, we'll see. Let's hope, or let's put some of the efforts into all of that. But yeah, it's a really big question which is emerging, and what is going to happen the day after Vučić falls? Because, sorry, just really quickly, we had this Milošević, who was in power in the 90s, and the opposition at the time was just the only thing that's enough is that he goes, and it doesn't matter what happens afterwards. What happened afterwards was decades of privatization, deindustrialization, etc., and further lumpen proletarization of the majority of the Serbian population. So it's not obviously we had wars. We had terrible decade in the 90s, but what happened afterwards was at least was terrible as well. So there is this sense of we have to discuss now what's going to happen so we don't get fooled once again.
I find just very interesting, this is like a common theme I feel that kind of has been popping up all over Europe in different ways, like this kind of, either whether it be corruption or neoliberalization leading to then these infrastructure disasters or crimes, as you rightfully call them, because they are completely unavoidable things. And that I think people don't fully grasp how these can actually be like moments that can truly change politics. Like the same thing is currently happening in Greece still with the reaction to the Tempe. Train disaster, and that's entirely within the same realm of that. Then budget cuts. Greece has been not even just neoliberalized, but made significantly poorer in the post Euro crisis. Yes, their economy may be doing like better now under New Democracy, but just simply in like a GDP sort of number goes up sort of way.
Yeah, but like Greece is now experiencing a thing that used to only happen in Japan.
Oh yeah.
Like, young Greek people are overworking themselves.
No, of course.
Work by death is happening in
Greece. Yeah.
Now.
No, but I mean, just simply in the sense is that then, like, as long as number goes up, Europe doesn't care. The European, like the Greek economy more or less is like recovered in the eyes of, the countries that matter. But then, an incident like that happened actually like a year from 3 days ago, I think on like February 2nd or something like that, is still creating, massive waves politically in Greece. And I know like people looking outwards into something like this could be like, okay, well, yeah, but that's not going to like do anything. But clearly in Serbia, we're seeing that then that just like the collective outrage of, and as similarly too, it isn't just one incident that then has, made these people pissed off. It's been, multiple cuts in pretty much every public sector in Greece as well, that people are constantly on the street. Like firefighters constantly fight with the police in Greece because they're not getting paid. And this is after, massive forest fires that then have been happening. And it's, for all that's horrible in the world, it's very odd seeing that then Serbia offer this like sense of like hope in this of like, okay, well there is, and I think that you mentioned that perfectly of that then we can hope for then the end of Vučić. The discussion of that then what comes after Vučić is of course another, massive problem. Who knows? Like as we've seen now with what seems to be the global rise of fascism, it may not be good, but nonetheless, that there's at least this kind of collective awareness that this regime is clearly not working, and that it is like enough cracks will form in the foundation to cause it to collapse, possibly. Or at least we can hope so.
Yeah, definitely. And in a sense, it's this kind of like contradiction within it, in a sense that it is working perfectly, but it's the question is for whom, and that's the issue, because Vučić, as you mentioned, like you can always use different statistics and present it as doing great. Serbia is often being in the Western media, especially being presented as really one of the few economies post-COVID which has shown great recovery. Our GDP is higher. GDP rise is higher than many of the European countries, et cetera, but at what cost? So Serbia has been pushed back to the periphery of the global market, and the workforce has the demands for the workforce in Serbia has dramatically changed. It's now almost exclusively for the low qualified work, and there is a decrease of unemployment, so there's more and more jobs but under worse and worse conditions. So there is an increase of GDP of in general economy, but has produced a much greater sense of insecurity, of worse living conditions, which is just a typical, it just fits perfectly into the pattern that you've mentioned. And I don't know, it just goes on so many different levels. It goes, I'd say, even further into this kind of just budget cuts. So essentially in the past 20 years, there has been a lot of privatization of the formerly state or publicly owned factories, land, etc. But what's left now is such a small amount of what is left to be privatized, and they're still doing it. And it just feels like a complete slap in the face. And it goes, from a park in front of my apartment, which is everything is overcrowded already. And it goes all the way to Rio Tinto coming to the Jadar Valley and trying just to get some land, and everybody just felt so hopeless for such a long time because everything here is done for the sake of these kind of numbers, which work perfectly fine, but not for the average working man and women within Serbia. That is
you've brought up something that I wanted to bring up right before we like close up, and I can turn to you to talk about like next steps, what we hope to happen, how people outside of Serbia can pay attention better. You mentioned the Jadar Valley and because all of this, just like as soon as you mentioned like this train line being heavily subsidized by Chinese companies, being a part of Belt and Road, I feel like does kind of like link very nicely to the Jadar Valley's like proposed like lithium mine of like everyone's talking about this like geostrategic interests. Please stop using TikTok. All this like kind of nuts, but like geostrategy seems to be like aggressively happening to Serbia, in the sense that like my memory of the Jadar Valley story kind of like breaking is just like Macron's grubby little mitts all over this idea that like Europe could have its own lithium source.
Oh, the King of France. He's
oh yeah. on behalf of like French car manufacturers,
yeah,
mostly,
right.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, can you outline just like what's at stake in the Jadar Valley, basically, with this mine as quickly as you can? Because we'll be precious with time here.
Yeah, well, obviously there are some kind of directly ecological issues because it's one of the whatever is the word, kind of like the filthiest way of exploiting minerals from land, which from experience, I think it's in is it Papua New Guinea where Rio Tinto did the same thing. I think there was the worst, but there's so many different, even if it's not Rio Tinto, it's a typical story of a few transnational companies coming somewhere to provide this kind of like key minerals for the functioning of the economy, and this with the transition to the green agenda, whatever. This switch to lithium away from carbon is strategic. So one issue is that exploitation of lithium in Western Serbia is going to make all of the water extremely dirty. And the way the river system works over there, it means that more than 50% of Serbia, their drinkable water is probably going to get polluted. That is one of the worries. In kind of like the let's say the instant reaction to everyone, which things. But obviously there is not just the maybe symbolic sense of it, that we have sold everything that there is here. And this is just, it used to be just a countryside, a really nice countryside. People were just living there, trying to make their ends meet, doing agriculture or having some cows or I'm missing the English words for all of this. Anyway, and all of a sudden, even that is up to sale. And what do we get from it? Like, if it's such a good thing, why doesn't the Serbian government do a mine, open up a mine, make even a car company? Like we have Fiat bought a car company in Serbia, which was inherited from Yugoslavia. It was completely functioning and making now kind of like electrical vehicles. Like we have some basis. Obviously, we'll need some new technology, but we could do something like that and not to be pressured by the profit making and prefer and prioritize the health of the people living here and some ecological standards over this. And even after that, have some higher more money in the budget by keeping it here. But this way, it's just being outsourced, and it's just giving some kind of like small injections of adrenaline to this current regime by giving some kind of minimum compensation that they receive for all of this. And the only thing that people are left is just misery.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, Rio Tinto has one of my favorite sections on a Wikipedia page, which is the controversy section, I strongly recommend you read through that. It's not good.
Isn't also Serbia one of the like most polluted countries in like Europe?
Oh, like air pollution.
Air pollution wise, yeah. Like
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. All right. That's
No. It is. It's not a unique case. The Balkan Sea in general. Balkan Sea is kind of like the periphery of Europe.
Yeah.
In a sense, Bosnia as well, Albania, etc. So it is Serbia, and there have been some smaller ecological protests in the previous years, but it all happens because all of the dirty industry has been moved away from this kind of like clean. The Europe does it, but also the China does it. They just put it here, and just because there are lower standards of and criteria for fulfilling all of this.
Yeah, it definitely falls into like that category of like Europe still does benefit from, the EU still benefits from the fact of the Western Balkans not being a part of the EU because they can do all their like, just push everything in there that's, that we don't want, or that this is also part of like Merkel's like Western Balkan plan, was that then she didn't want them into the like, she did this plan only for migration reasons, and then continuously stated like, oh, economically they're not important to us, and just like pretty much just like shat on them while just being like, yeah, this is for like security reasons. And it's kind of feels like that's always been the general attitude. I mean, even when Kieran mentioning like Macron getting, excited about this is just the like, my feelers were going of like, all right, this is typical EU attitudes towards the Balkans.
I think the issue is here. Sorry, just real quickly with Rio Tinto and this lithium mine is that it's a symbol. It became a symbolic act of resistance against all of this. Is precisely for these reasons. Whether Balkans is relevant in economic sense to the rest of Europe, it is extremely relevant in economic terms by providing cheap labor force. And many of the, especially German companies and then French, etc., have their companies, especially this kind of like in a lower level of the value production. They are in Serbia, they're in Montenegro, and Bosnia, and Albania, etc. They're working here. But in a country where trade unions have been completely destroyed and disregarded, there has not been a lot of chance of expressing this in kind of like class terms. So it's usually being expressed in these kind of examples when it's more kind of like palpable. You can much easily imagine this kind of like a shared thing, somebody stealing your land or something like that, than just destroying your life by the terrible working conditions. So this is kind of like a connection to all of this. But I think Balkans are are a key component, but now on the periphery for the Europe.
Yeah, and massively important because the way that like the EU talks about these things, or like EU countries press talks about these kind of situations, like we're falling out of it now, but the like love affair that like European media had with Edi Rama of just like, oh, Albania is doing so well from tourism, what's happening in the chrome mines, don't worry about it, that kind of thing. Or like the richest man in Bosnia is basically made his money through making seatbelts for VW, like just a real direct connection to like German industry.
Makes sense.
As an example. Yeah. But going back to the protests, and final note here is just kind of like, what do you think we can expect in the next like short term? And like, I know predicting the future can be a fool's game sometimes, and I don't want to commit you to anything, but what are we hoping for in the next like week, 2 weeks, month, that kind of thing?
Sure thing. Yeah. I think the general feeling is even among the students is they have sort of hit the ceiling with their way. Like they have shaken up the society, they have motivated it, they've opened up some of the questions. But as we know, structurally students don't have such a huge leverage on it. It has to be done by the working class. So what they've done, and they've been constantly trying, is to find allies among the working class. But the first one that is directly connected and is closest to actually going on a complete general strike within their branch is the education sector, the trade, the teachers. They've been on strike, as I told you, when the incident happened in Novi Sad. They were already protesting and on strike, and now they are actually going into an illegal strike, complete stop of their work. And actually, Vucic is so strongly trying to prevent them from going on actual strike. He's throwing everything now with them and their trade union leaders. But it just came too late, and it's only now the trade union leaders who are accepting even these negotiations and also the demands. But the base, the teachers, are refusing all of that. They're massively leaving these huge trade unions, organizing separately outside of these institutions in new trade unions, etc. So I would say the crucial, let's say, bridge which could, I don't know, transfer this student rebellion to other parts of the society, other parts of the working class, are the teachers. If they manage to hold a huge strike, and they could also mean a significant symbolic importance in a sense of shaking up these really conservative structures, which are trade unions in these post-socialist countries, which exclusively just work for the government. They could put the hand of solidarity for the other parts of the working class, all the way up to the miners and the others in the factory, which could then influence the wider process of production in Europe and the entire world. Precisely as we just talked, they are more directly connected to Germany, to France, or wherever. And this, I think, is the crucial way of going there. And this is the moment. These weeks is something that is happening. I think the number of schools that are going on strike is increasing. Vucic is sensing that, so that's why he threw government down the drain. He's now trying to do kind of like a proactive thing of he's assembling a new movement, kind of like for Serbia, and he's definitely trying to divert this attention in a nationalist sense. He tried it with Kosovo in November, but he failed. He didn't really manage. He tried it with Croatia, saying that it was infiltration by the Croatians, etc. But now, so on 15th of February, it's a statehood day for Serbia, and he's planning a protest in Novi Sad, which not much is known, but there has been increased talk of this separatist from Vojvodina. So Novi Sad is the capital of Vojvodina, which is an autonomous province. Kosovo used to be autonomous province of Serbia, which has declared independence in 2008. Now there is a story that Vojvodina is going to declare independence, and this is the story coming from the regime media and the regime. So my guess is that he was going to present himself as some kind of a savior of the Serbian cause. He's going to direct all of this back to the nationalist idea. It might even go back as, diminishing the status of autonomous province to Vojvodina, just to divert attention to all of this. That's what might happen. On the other hand, students have held marches from Belgrade to Novi Sad. They're planning a huge protest on the 15th in Kragujevac, which is the fourth biggest city in Serbia, and which still, at least symbolically, holds is a symbol of kind of like industrial center of Serbia, which, I don't know, gives me a lot of hope. Their Fiat factory, which is one of the biggest subsidized foreign investors in Serbia, it has a factory there, and like many others. So yeah, I don't know, it gives me hope that there is some kind of way of actually pushing him back, because it's kind of like a Mexican standoff at the moment. Vucic cannot fulfill all of these demands and remain in power. Students by themselves cannot really overtake him. They need allies. So everybody's stepping up their game. That's how I feel, and hopefully we're going to make it go our way.
Great. I really hope that happens. And yeah, that'd be good. I mean, yeah. Get rid of Vucic. Like, you have to understand.
We're trying,
yeah, do it. Yeah, it's like I'm saying that as if I'm giving you a command. It's like, I'm talking to a Serbian protester being like, I didn't think of getting rid of Vucic. That's a great idea. Random Irish podcaster.
I still can't get over the fact that he didn't visit the site after the crime happened. Like, I know obviously he is responsible for the crime, but it's just PR in politics 101. Like, you go to a site of a a tragic event in your country after it happens.
It would have even helped like get rid of like any accusations. It might have even helped get rid of accusations of responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. It's just PR. Yeah. It's like you know, people are like, oh look, he cares about us, so maybe he wasn't so involved or whatever. But by not going, everyone's like, I believe he might have something to do with this.
Yeah.
Seems guilty.
Corner Späti deep lore on Alexander Vučić as well is that then he loves when he's doing like, so he has two modes, you know, he has his like wearing a suit and then like the worst fits imaginable. All right. And so like, I mean, he'll show up to like an event in like an Abercrombie and Fitch like hoodie or something like that. And
I still have that
you have like a whole collection of them. I think it would have been maybe worse if Vučić like went to it with just like a hoodie that just says like boss on it, you know? Like he would do that. Thank you, Uma, for knowing exactly what I'm referencing.
No, but indeed, it is such a contradiction. His entire PR, it has been doing, it was working up until now, but it was quite contradictory. And even now, it just feels like they scored so many own goals, even in this movement. Like it would have died out by itself or something like that, and wait for another opportunity if he didn't send the thugs. They've done a terrible campaign. So one of the symbols of the movement is bloody hand. Just shown like open bloody hand, saying your hands are bloody. They responded with their campaign with a red middle finger, just showing it to everyone.
God. That's so fucking corny. That sucks.
So it's one of like the worst own goals, and it kind of like I think it even infuriated even more and more people. And it was like, so you're admitting that you have a bloody hand, and you're also, ignorant, and and it just, it has so many own goals, but it also shows that their maneuver space is more narrow and narrow, and they are not really apt to all of this. It's been working perfectly fine for them for more than 12 years. They're just repeating their scheme of and patterns of how they're controlling, but they can't do it anymore. Obviously, the rules have changed, the society has changed, and for the first time, the masses have found some form of political expression. So even if it all collapses by, I don't know, what did you say was 17 or whenever? Sorry about that. Even if I don't know, student movement, this entire movement collapses, this is the every day is not going to look the same in Serbia after all of this. So many people have been radicalized, politicized, started thinking about it, and started believing that some form of change is possible.
Yeah, so even if Vučić remains, things have to. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Here's hoping. For anyone outside of Serbia who wants to pay attention, do you have any recommendations?
Well, try to obviously the first step is showing some kind of solidarity, but I feel like we've reached that already. I think we should reach a point of having some kind of like more practical connectivity of I don't know. I read Tariq Ali's memoirs of the 60s, and he said when the Italian communist delegation went to Vietnam in the 60s and asked them like, how can we help you? Can we send you, I don't know, some food, some clothing or something like that? And what they said is make a revolution in Italy. So that's something that I would suggest. I don't know, everyone else, like the world is so interconnected in its 21st century. One hit in one place directly hurts the bosses in another. So that is one way. Like Serbia, even if we did this, I don't know, topple Vučić, it's not going to change the entire world. It's not going to change everything until the entire world changes. And for that, we need to start making this kind of like practical connections instead of just, social media supporting, like activism. The revolution is not going to be televised, whatever some people say. So yeah, that's something that I would suggest.
Overthrow your local Vučić is what I'm getting. All right, I'm down with that.
Everyone has their own Vučić. If you can't see the Vučić, you're the Vučić. Right. Well, all it leaves me to say is, Nemanja, thank you so much for coming on and explaining all of this to us.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
And with that, we will catch you on the next time. Ciao, ciao. Thank you very much.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.